Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.
Morning glory, America. Evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt in Studio West. That music means the Hillsdale Dialogue, as promised yesterday in a preview, is on with Dr. Larry Arnn this week, talking about Donald Trump and domestic policy. Next week, national security, as we mentioned yesterday. Dr. Arnn, good afternoon to you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Now, as we talked about yesterday, we want to kind of do domestic policy today and national security policy next week. But I want to make sure, in case people didn't hear you open the show yesterday and preview this, give us your general reaction to the first roughly month of Donald Trump back in the Oval Office.
Wow. He's breaking the China. I thought it was going to be fast. It's faster than that. I thought it was going to be very purposeful. It's more so. And he has launched a thoroughgoing attack on the nature and being of the administrative state. And it's a theme, and it's being carried out everywhere.
Now, I wrote a column for Fox News yesterday that I thought Trump derangement syndrome had been sworn off by many journalists, but they fell off the wagon, and they have long Trump derangement syndrome now. They can't stop themselves from attempting to read minds and to use the language of psychiatry because they're upset with policy choices. Are we going to be in this place for 4 years of people who are just going to hate on Trump, whatever he does?
Well, we are, and I have never had a day where I didn't think we would. So step back from, first of all, there's going to be an argument about what constitutes the rule of law. Is it the rule of law when the president fires people and closes agencies? Well, the details matter a lot about that, but the truth is we have not been living under the rule of law for a long time now, because the laws are made outside the legislature in countless agencies. I mean, literally countless. There's a dispute about how many are there. And they make these laws, and they enforce these laws, and they prosecute under these laws, and they judge under these laws. And that's inside each agency, subject matter by subject matter. So is that the rule of law? I have not thought so for 45 years. Is the effort to restore that a violation of the rule of law? Well, we'll see how it plays out, and we'll see what specifically he does, because he can't do anything that's not authorized by law. And I don't think he is or will, but that's, we should watch that. You have to remember that this is you have to think, if you conceive of this as the most fundamental kind of argument, the argument, what kind of rule are we going to live under? Who's in charge? Our representatives or the administration? And that means, direct employees of the government of the United States are 23 million in number, and then there's countless long-term contractors too. Nobody knows how many they are. Does the rule of law mean that they, through their processes that are very complex, does it mean they are the ultimate arbiters? Or are the representatives of the people the ultimate arbiters? And that's the question.
Now,
and
Dr.
inside
Arnn, I think it's in Federalist 51. I'm going to paraphrase Madison. Justice is the end of government. And I think he said that. I think that's almost an exact quote. I taught it last week. Is what Donald Trump doing just? We just spent like 3 months with you and Professor O'Toole on The Republic, which is about the just regime. Is what Donald Trump doing just?
Well, everything he's doing, I think so. And I've been following it. But the main lines are what we can understand, right? He comes into politics in about the year 2015 with a promise to drain the swamp. And he ran for office on it 3 times. He won twice. And he has run on this. And this is what it takes. I mean, talk about a particular that's, the latest thing, U.S. aid.
Oh.
That's foreign aid, right? And what's being discovered in that? First of all, they're giving a lot of money away for a lot of crazy things, transgender surgeries in Guatemala or something like that. But they're giving a lot of money to U.S.-based left-wing groups to organize the world the way they want. And so the voters are paying for that, right? And the voters are not in favor of the left. They may or may not be in favor of the right, but they're certainly not in favor of the left. And that means, that, by the way, go back to Barack Obama's career. What is meant by community organizing? It means that under government grants, people go into communities and they organize the people for political ends. And the government is paying for that. That's what USA is doing on a significant scale. And its job is to help foreign people in need and to advance U.S. policy. One of the biggest recipients I read in the paper this morning is in New York City. And so what are they doing with that money? And so he's undoing a lot of that.
Mary Catherine Ham, one of our favorite commentators, posted yesterday, as the wagon circled around the besieged Politico, which wasn't given a grant, but which the government subscribed to their $11,000 or $12,000 a year subscription excessively to the tune of millions of dollars. She said, hey, friends, we are in the explain yourself era. Don't tell me you're bereaved or aggrieved. Tell me what you were doing. Explain yourself. I think that's very well put. What Doge is doing, what Elon Musk is shepherding, is an explain yourself team of accountability. And by the way, the executive branch answers to the president, and he has a right to know. I'll get in the second segment as to whether or not he has the right to fire, but he has a right to know everything, Dr. Arnn, does he not?
Yeah, and there's this move toward transparency everywhere, right? Like the government is fond of saying to people, we can't disclose that information. Well, there needs to be a bias in favor of disclosing it. And it's our government. It's supposed to work for us. We need to know what it's doing. And they're doing that. And, it's fun to read X now because, there's a lot of fighting going on there. And Elon Musk, he owns it, and he's on it a lot. And a lot of critics of his are on it, too. And I do notice the pattern. See, all this is happening so fast. What is the pattern? Who knows? But right now, the pattern is they get a criticism and they talk about it and release information about it. Say, and does the President of the United States have the authority to send a representative, a subordinate, into an agency and ask them questions and reveal to the public what they learned? If he doesn't have that authority, then the elected representative of the government is not controlling the executive branch.
It is that simple. It is that simple.
Yeah.
It's Article 2. There are checks. We'll talk about them when we come back. But it is Article 2 of the Constitution. The unitary executive isn't a theory. It's written in plain English, ratified in 1789, amended many times since, but it's just right there. The executive branch is headed by the president. I believe it's Federalist 70 that says energy in the executive is the primary ingredient to successful government. And 1 minute, Dr. Under the break. He's got energy. Donald Trump has a lot of energy.
It is breathtaking. I fancy myself, like most Americans, being somewhat used to him. This is more, wow.
He's been thinking for 4 years. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what he's been thinking about, the changes, the revolutionary approach. It is revolutionary, but it's not. It's really back to the basics of the constitutional structure when George Washington would hire people and could fire people before everything. And I'll say this to set up the next segment. The Civil Service Reform Act, which was called the Pendleton Act, passed in 1883. It had a major overhaul in 1978, the Civil Service Reform Act. And a lot of people say he's breaking the law. I don't know that. I don't even know if the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978 is constitutional. It hadn't been tested. But I'll talk about that with Dr. Larry Arnn when we come back. Meanwhile, all things Hillsdale are at hillsdale.edu. All of our prior conversations, the high and the low, the immediate and the long ago, are collected at hughforhillsdale.com. Stay tuned, America. I'll be back with Dr. Arnn We do part one of the first look at the Donald Trump presidency, part two.
It's no secret that Americans are more divided than ever. And it's not just over what policies will improve our great country. No, it's over whether America is great at all, whether America deserves our love. That's why Imprimis is so important. Imprimis looks at the issues of the day from a constitutional perspective, reminding citizens always of our great heritage of liberty. For more than 50 years, Imprimis has featured speeches from the smartest conservative thinkers and writers at Hillsdale events. These days, Hillsdale publishes people like Molly Hemingway, Andy Puzder, Harmeet Dillon, and Chris Rufo. Over 6.4 million American households and businesses receive Imprimis absolutely free. And I urge you to sign up for it today at no charge. To get your free lifetime subscription, go to hillsdale.edu/lifetime right now. Or text the word Imprimis to 71844 and we'll send you a link to sign up for your free lifetime subscription. That's IMPRIMIS to 71844.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn is president of Hillsdale College. The Hillsdale Dialogue underway. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Go and sign up for Imprimis. Go and get your application if you're a youngster who wants to go and actually learn things. Dr. Arnn, I had a lot of friends in the federal government. I was at Fed for 6 years. You have friends in the federal government. You have a lot of alum in the federal government. I hate that people are dislocated and that they lose their jobs and sudden changes happen. I know it's tense, et cetera. But we are $2 trillion in the red almost every year. We have $36 trillion in debt. Hardest thing I've ever done is fire people. I've had to do it a couple of times. I hate doing it. But the government doesn't have any money. What part of this don't people understand?
I heard a great podcast by Mark Andreessen on Peter Robinson. And he's a man of big understanding and a gazillionaire. And he said something that chilled me. He said that we're adding $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days.
Yeah.
And he said the pace of it is accelerating. And so, bring the question of, in a business, I run a big business, you run a business. How much does it cost is crucial. And you're always asking that all the time. Well, they're asking how much these things cost. And do we have to do them? And, if we cut, I don't even know if this is true anymore. They said they thought they could cut $2 trillion out of the federal budget. That would, but the numbers are apparently getting worse. I don't know. But that would maybe get it back into balance.
We have not had a balanced budget since Clinton.
Yeah. And, it's the federal government is half the economy. What are we going to do? Give it the other half? Not the federal government, the government, state, local, and federal all together. If you add in something for the regulatory costs, some moderate number, you get a little over 50%. And that's change, right? That's a sensitive fact because in a liberal society, most things are supposed to take place outside the government in the society where people live as free people and take care of themselves. And so if you adjust that relationship, and I've said before, it's my favorite statistic, that number anytime before 1930 was about 12%, was the whole government, state, federal, and local, as opposed to the public sector, private sector. So the point is we've made this major adjustment from the public, from the private to the public, and now there's some adjustment, very energetic adjustment going on in the other direction, and a lot of people in the public sector don't like it. And that was bound to happen. And I don't know. I don't think I used to say, well, I still say it. Donald Trump, I figured this out in 2015. That's when I met him for the first time. And I started watching him. I was interested in him because I saw his effect on a big crowd of people where he was busy upstaging me, as he does everybody he gets around. And it didn't bother me, I'm not in competition with him. But I watched his effect, and I watched what he said, and I said, wow, look at this, He's terribly explicit. And a way that he goes about it, one of his ways of going about it is he marks out a very strong position. And then he works through it and ends up maybe somewhere not quite that far. And I think that's a kind of methodology of his. It's in his book, The Art of the Deal, only parts of which I have read, but it's an interesting book. And another thing, there's that woman, and I'm going to forget her name now, but there's a journalist in Pennsylvania who was
Selena Zito.
predicted that he would win the 2020 election. And she wrote this sentence. It's a great sentence. It summarizes everything. The supporters of Trump take him seriously, but not literally. And the opponents of Trump take him literally, but not seriously. And I think the supporters are closer to understanding what he's about.
I think that's true. And I've just given up. I think I've interviewed him on the air more than any other journalist in America. And I don't know what he's thinking. I can only relay to people what he says, and I can only ask him questions that he triggers. But I don't attribute motive to people because I've been too long in this business to understand motive or whether or not there's a plan or whether or not someone's emotional. But to me, the breakdown in journalism is complete, meaning they're not in the business of conveyor belting facts and statements about what happened. They're in the business of getting out their crystal balls and reading minds. And it's horrible. It's absolutely a breakdown in what journalism is supposed to be.
I ran over to the dining hall and had a quick lunch before I came over here. And this time I happened to be sitting with some graduate students. And we got on to Aristotle. And I claim that one of the first things you learn in Aristotle is to look at each thing for what it is. Just try to understand that thing. Don't always think that something has a dignity because of it's in service of something else or higher or lower than something else. First of all, what is that thing? Look at that thing. Well, I think that's what journalism is. What is the thing here? And you could write a terribly interesting article without any bias in it at all. If you just said, and by the way, I don't know how I got on it, but somehow I'm on a email list from the White House Office of Communications, and I'm getting like 10 or 15 a day. And they're interesting,
Send them along. Send them along.
Yeah, they're very funny. And they say things like, he did this. And often it'll be an executive order or an account of one. And it'll be, whereas there'll be 2 or 3 of those. So that's the why, right? And then here, we're doing this, right? Well, a good article about that would be to say, he says this, and then look up some facts.
Yes, it's not. That's what it used to be. It didn't used to be a condemnation or praise. I'll be right back with Dr. Arnn. Don't go anywhere except to hillsdale.edu. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. All of our prior dialogues at hughforhillsdale.com. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt with Dr. Larry Arnn, looking back over the first roughly month of Donald Trump as president for the second time. Let's do the easy one in the short segment. He signed an executive order on Wednesday of this week saying there are 2 genders and boys will not play in girls' sports and men will not play in women's sports. And by the way, Los Angeles and International Olympic Committee, we're not changing that rule when you come to Los Angeles in 2028. That has an 80% approval in overnight polling. 80%. That's not usually seen in American politics. What'd you make of that choice, Dr. Arnn?
Well, that's he does have he has good instincts. I mean, first of all, isn't that obvious?
Yes.
Girls are different from boys, and in sports they're different, right? And girls' sports, by the way, we've always had women at Hillsdale College from the first day, and we have had women's sports from the first day, and women's sports are exhilarating and fun to watch. And our winningest team is actually a mixed sex team, our shotgun team, and our pistol team. They got both on them, right? Girls and boys can do that the same, but after them, our winningest team is either women's track and cross country or women's volleyball. And they just draw huge crowds, and it's thrilling to watch. But, the women's cross-country team has twice been second in the country. And
I didn't know that.
Won. And so...
because they're running in the winter up there in Michigan on ice.
When I see them, they're delightful, and I always call them the losers. What do you, second? We happy with second? And
I'm sure they appreciate that.
But the point is, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But the girls, they're not as big and strong as the boys. And so the point is, women's sports, great, awesome. Same test of soul and character and intellect and body as for the boys, but they're not the same. And so
now let me ask you, I think Lincoln said this, and I think I heard it from you. If you push nature out the front door, it will come back in through the back door. Is that something Lincoln said?
Yeah, Lincoln is repeating Jefferson when he says that.
Okay, so isn't that
Jefferson said, if you throw nature out the front door with a pitchfork, it'll be in the back door before you can turn around. And
so isn't that this executive order?
Yeah. And it's, so much about this that, if you're a man of my mind, that is to say, and I've thought about these questions now for a lifetime, 50 years. This is delightful. And one of the most delightful things about it is the way in which it cuts to the chase. And it leads to the most wonderful jokes, too. Like, maybe we should put the USAID agency on Mars. You get to thinking of the oddest things. And once you say something crazy like that, you can just about imagine he or Trump or Elon Musk saying something like that. It's very vivid. And, he did. You mentioned that he was out for 4 years. And my way of summarizing the effect of that is, I've never been on safari, but if I ever did go on a safari to shoot an elephant, they would probably advise me, if you're going to shoot it, you should probably kill it. And, they didn't quite kill Donald Trump. And now he's had some time to think. And so a lot of stuff is happening right now. And by the way, we don't know how it's going to come out, except that I predict confidently that we're going to see levels of intense controversy like you can't imagine.
Domestic and foreign. Next week, we're going to talk about foreign controversy, but this week, I want to stay focused on this. Do you think he has good constitutional lawyers around him?
Yeah, he has had, as a rule. And I don't quite know. I forget the name of the White House counsel. I've heard that he's good. And, his attorney general is good. And, she showed in the hearings she's very smart. And so they're hiring people. You see, I assert, and this is, a very partisan point, which will be fought out now for the rest of Trump's term. I think he's serious about that.
Oh, he is very. And he's got, I don't know the White House counsel. Pam Bondi, I've met a couple of times. She's very impressive. Todd Blanche, I've talked to once. He's very impressive. They're smart people. Not sure how these constitutional arguments will work themselves out, but I'm going to talk about that with Dr. Arnn when we come back. Meantime, head over to hillsdale.edu for all things Hillsdale, or hughforhillsdale.com for all of our prior Hillsdale dialogues. Stay with us.
Hillsdale College is a small, Christian, classical liberal arts college that operates independently of government funding, and we want you or your son or daughter to apply. At Hillsdale, students grow in heart and mind by studying timeless truths in a supportive community dedicated to the highest things. Hillsdale College costs significantly less than other nationally ranked private liberal arts colleges and receives regular recognition as a best value, and nearly all students receive financial aid. Our robust core curriculum, vibrant student life, and 8-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio make for an education like no other. For more information or to fill out an application, visit hillsdale.edu/info. That's hillsdale.edu/info.
back, America. Dr. Larry Arnn is president of Hillsdale College, where if you're lucky, you'll send your son or daughter and they will get in and they will do well. The applications are at hillsdale.edu, as are all their video courses. All of our conversations dating back years on old things like the Iliad and the Odyssey and Plato's Republic to new things like what happened last week in the Oval Office are collected at Hugh for Hillsdale.com. Dr. Arnn, I'd like to ask you about four things and just your guesses, because I teach constitutional law. I have no idea. Number one, the DEI executive order banishing all use of race and gender and any other suspect class from everything the government does or from anyone who receives any federal funding from using it. Number two, the birthright citizenship EO. That is an open question. I think it will probably be decided very quickly by the court that if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen, but it's not a closed question. It's an open question. Number three, the impoundment of funds in the face of the Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974. And then finally, just firing career civil servants. What do you think the court's going to do? Because there are all lawsuits everywhere. What do you think the court's going to do generally about Donald Trump acting as an aggressive, energized executive?
Well, there are two questions. Is it constitutional, and what's the court going to do? And I remind you, lawyer, that those are not the same question.
They're not.
But I think... So what was the first one?
First one is the DEI executive order banishing the use of race and gender in every part of the government and from anyone accepting federal money.
Well, I would guess that would stand.
I do too.
It's the whole point of the American regime. Birthright citizenship, it may turn on this. I happen to know, because I took a course on the 14th Amendment when I was in graduate school, in the debates over the 14th Amendment in the Congress back then, after the Civil War, they make plain, it's not a big point, by the way, but every time it comes up, it's very plain. They don't intend to include children of people who do not owe their loyalty to the United States. And one of there's 3 or 4 instances, if I recall correctly, and one of them concerns children of ambassadors serving in this country. So the point is, I don't think there are high court cases that say that if you're born here, born and naturalized in the United States is the 14th Amendment language, that means that if you happen to be born in this country, then you're a citizen of the country. But I don't think that that's what they meant when they passed the 14th Amendment.
Wong Kim Ark, 1898, child of 2 legal temporary residents in the United States who are subject to the Emperor of China. They go back to China. He goes to visit them. He's not allowed back into the country. The Supreme Court says, he's a citizen. He was born here, and his parents were here, even though they remain subjects of the emperor. I think that will control, under the history and tradition and reliance aspects of the Constitution, the rule that's been adopted, plain language. And I am of the school, and you may not be. Love the Federalist Papers, love the debates in Congress. What matters is what the text says. And it's plain and obvious meaning when it was voted upon. I'm with Scalia. Off with your statutory history. I don't care. I want to know what the text says. What do you make of his argument, Scalia's argument?
Well, on that particular thing, I think you have to figure out what the words mean, right? And did they mean? I mean, did they mean that, you're changing planes at LaGuardia Airport and you're great with child and you stop and have the baby? Does that make the baby a citizen? I cannot imagine that they meant that. And, or that's a supportable interpretation in good sense. That's what I think. And we'll see what the court does.
I think the history and tradition and the practice in 1868, widely, was we had a lot of people entering the country through Ellis Island. They got their things stamped. A lot of people came in illegally. A lot of people came in after World War II and didn't get their papers, and they had kids. And the history and tradition and practice of the United States since 1868 is that kids are different from parents. And we can eject the parents if they don't have papers. You can't eject the kid if they've grown up to be an adult. By the way, Trump agrees with that. He told me that in January. He said, I got a place for the dreamers, meaning children who were brought over the border illegally when they were young and grew up here. They don't have any place to go. I think Trump is a very common sense guy on this stuff. Do you?
Yeah. And I don't, first of all, if you got to, you have to make some adjustments about the history and practice. It used to be the great achievement was to get here, hard to get here, right? And when you got here, you're going to have to find a job or else you'll starve. In a world like that, that's, we live in the world of airplanes and large populations right over the border. And so, as I say, the reason, by the way, that I don't history and tradition and blah, blah, and your court cases that you love so much, the truth of the matter is, in the history and tradition and meaning of America, citizenship is a high station.
Yes.
And it requires loyalty. America is a set of practices and beliefs, and the citizens are supposed to carry that in their breast. And so this whole idea that just an accident can make you a citizen. Now, I was born to American parents, and that's an accident that makes me a citizen. But my parents were loyal to the United States of America, served in its army, And so the point is, you can't wipe that away. In a way, to be a subject of the British crown, that means the king is the sovereign. We are not subjects. We are citizens. We are owners of this country.
I've been teaching Professor McRae's Land of Hope, and the whole deal for 250 years was to achieve self-rule. I think he makes that argument as well as anyone has ever made it. Does birthright citizenship threaten self-rule, Dr. Arnn, anyway?
Well, it might, sure. If, the point is, remember, to be naturalized, that's an interesting word, isn't it, by the way? Naturalized. It is now, and the word nature comes from the Latin word for birth. And so if you go through the process of naturalization, then it's like you become as if you were born here, right? And that process requires an examination, right? And so the accident of having been born in the country doesn't require it.
You have to know it. I'm coming right back with Dr. Arnn for the final segment, America. Don't go anywhere. Stay right where you are. Welcome back, America. Dr. Larry Arnn here for the short segment of the Hillsdale Dialogue. I'm Hugh Hewitt. He's in Hillsdale, Michigan, where he helms Hillsdale College, all things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Dr. Arnn, Andy McCarthy is a very smart guy. He and I were talking this week about the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974, the Inspectors General Act, and the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978. These have never been tested in the United States Supreme Court. There are no precedents. Everyone's pointing to them and nobody knows. It's actually, we're going to test the limits of the presidential authority in Article 2. Who do you hope wins? Because whatever power Donald Trump gets, the next Democrat who's elected will also get.
Well, so, I argue and believe that our serious knowledge of the nature of the progressive era and its laws begins in scholarship with a man named John Marini, who wrote his doctoral thesis on that act.
Oh, really?
And it astonished all of us. Oh, yeah. Back in the day, I thought we were all thinking about Aristotle and Shakespeare and Lincoln and Churchill, and he's doing the Budget Control Act. And we said, what is that?
That's right? So awful.
But that's, yeah. You need, my opinion is, and this is, by the way, it's easy to see that this is how the founders thought. The federal government is a government of few and supreme subjects. And it works this way. The Congress legislates and the president executes. Well, it's not like that anymore. Now the Congress delegates legislation and execution and judging disputes under the execution to vast number of administrative agencies. And so Nixon tried to get control of those agencies. And what that act says is, if the Congress says he's got to spend the money, he's got to spend the money. And that means he's got to give it to them, and they're going to spend the money, right? So this issue is a step back toward control of the vast administrative apparatus by somebody who's elected to control it. And that means we can fire him later. And I think that's critical. That needs to happen. So I hope that he is allowed to do all of that.
I agree. I hope that is the case. And it ain't going to be long until we find out. And it's his court. So he spent the first term setting up the trampoline on which he is now jumping. And so we will see how high it lets him go. Dr. Larry Arnn, thank you so much. He'll be back next week. We're going to talk about national security in the Trump era as it's beginning. And I promise you this two-parter, you don't want to miss it, because we'll be able to play it back at the end of the second Trump term as Donald Trump departs from Mar-a-Lago with a wave, and see if we were right about anything. And if we are, good. And if we aren't, doesn't matter, because Donald Trump's going to do what he wants to do until someone who can say no, that would be the Supreme Court, says no, and we don't know that they're going to say no. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Harley. Thank you, General Ismail. Talk to you on Monday, America, on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.